here we are. I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am talking with Dan St. Jacques, Providence, Rhode Island mainstay of many punk rock or noise rock bands, however you want to characterize them, going back to the 90s. I guess we can call him a rock and roll lifer. And his latest band, The Hammer Party, are currently working on material with the hope that we're going to see something, whether it's an EP or an album, later on this year. But we have a lot to talk about in this interview, going through Dan's musical upbringing, talking about some of the different bands that he's played with and that have influenced him and he's seen over the years, bands like Babes in Toyland and God Bullies and Butthole Surfers and Rollins Band. We talk about where the Hammer Party got their name from, starting out originally as a plan to be a one-off show big black cover band, and how they evolved from writing their own material, getting a live drummer into the band. Loads of other stories, live experiences at shows, talking about the music business and how that's changed over the years, the impact of digitization of music, talking about Dan going from being a bass player to be a vocalist, some of the different people that have influenced him. It was a cool chat. Cool guy, great to talk to. And I'm going to play a track, Tiamat's Revenge, which was the most recent single that the Hammer Party had from last year. You can follow the Hammer Party on Facebook and on Instagram. You can go check them out on Bandcamp as well. And if you would like to follow me, you can do so at Tom Osman Sounds. You can visit my website, tomosmansounds.com, for all the stuff that I'm doing musically myself. So without further ado, Dan St. Jacques of the Hammer Party, of Landed, and many, many other bands. Take it away. In all your glory. Well, nice to see you as well as
Hey, you too. Nice to meet you.
I think I heard a barking. How many dogs do you have at home?
Just one.
All right. He or she?
He.
What's his name?
Beethoven.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a rescue dog from Texas.
Cool. That's very good.
Yeah.
Named after the composer or the children's movie?
I'm pretty sure he's named after the composer, but I mean, we don't know. He came with the name.
Ah, I
And
see.
he already knew it, so we didn't change it, you know?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you are based in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yep.
Born and bred, is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Because you've had a lot of musical projects over the years, and I want to get into some of them.
Oh, cool.
Is the Hammer Party your only current band, or do you have a variety of different bands that are kind of ongoing?
That's pretty much the main one right now. I have some other bands that we just play every once in a while. Like my band Landed. We never officially broke up, but we're not active right now.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't surprise me if we, got a show or two, some point coming up in the future. Usually someone offers to like fly us out to LA or something. We play a handful of gigs, New York City or something. We practice for a week in front of it. We've been playing since the late 90s together. So
yeah,
all we need is a week to kind of get, our bearings, and then we'll play, a string of shows or something. But, that's the only other one that's kind of ongoing.
Okay. And so like, what's the origin of you playing in bands? Because I was kind of having a bit of a look through, like trolling through to try and figure out your various different projects. And I think I found like about 7, but I reckon I'm probably missing about 5 of them in total.
Yeah.
So what was your first band where you're kind of like, you look back and you go, this is where I started performing or making music?
Well, in 1990, my first band was called Sourpuss. And it's funny because the drummer in that band is the drummer in the Hammer Party now.
Oh, right. That's funny. It worked out that way.
Yeah, that's really cool, We started together right out of high school, basically. Back in 1990, Joe and I were both 18 years old. And we met up with this other guy I think he was like 22 or something, Jay Tatro. And we started a 3-piece grunge band, kind of like psychedelic grunge, post-punk, kind of like a little bit of Stooges, a little bit of MC5, a little bit of Black Flag, Blue Chair. that kind of thing was happening, right, in the early 90s.
Yeah.
We all had long hair and, young bucks. And we just started playing around Providence, and we were able to open up for a lot of the national acts, touring. We opened for Babes in Toyland and God Bullies and, ton of cool bands. It was a lot of fun, and I didn't stop. I had so much fun doing that. I just, the first break I took was 2020 when everybody had to take a break.
Yeah. So from that point of view, were you like being able to support yourself doing music, or you were always having other jobs at the same time?
Yeah, no. I was making sandwiches like in the college area, like on Thayer Street in Providence is where the Brown and University campuses are. And I was like making sandwiches on Thayer Street. I had quit college, and I was just, working, doing odd jobs like that, just to pay for life so you could, play music. But back then rent was really cheap. We had an apartment, on the east side, which is the nice side of town. My apartment was a 3-bedroom apartment for $375 a month. So 3-bedroom, we each paid $1.25. And I always had, everything I needed, working crappy job. And, I didn't have a car. I just rode a bicycle around, and, we had a blast. You could do that back then, rent was so cheap in Providence.
Yeah. And how long have you been in the place that you're living in now? Is this your own place, or are you still renting?
Yeah. I bought a house about a little over 20 years ago. It's fairly reasonable now. Rents in Providence have gone skyrocketed. Like that apartment I had for $375 in 1990 is probably $3,000 now.
Yeah.
Like easy. And the place I'm in now, I have a mortgage, so it's like $1,200 a month. I've had it for 20 years, So I feel very lucky, and we practice in the basement. I don't have to pay for a separate practice space.
That is very good to have a built-in practice space as well. And have you got a lot of records in your place?
I do. I don't know if you can see over here.
Oh, yeah.
Behind me, I have a couple grand, about 2,000 albums, maybe something like that, give or take. I've been collecting records since the mid-'80s, since I was a teenager. And I never left Rhode Island, so I didn't really, have to go too far with them. So they're a pain to move, as you're probably well aware of.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as you can see, my record collection is nowhere near as big as yours. But a couple of years ago, I had to move from Berlin back to the UK. And even just that amount of records was a nightmare to get them. Yeah. So it makes you realize, it's not convenient having records if you want to move.
It is not. But, I love having the library, and I have a, big library of books as well. And I still kept all my CDs. I got my CDs on this side. Probably have like 500 CDs that I don't know, I uploaded them onto iTunes, and, I want the physical thing, No,
I totally relate to that. Yeah. It's like a lot of the online stuff is really convenient, but there is something, whether it's with records, maybe it's to do with the sound, but even with CDs, where it's like you could still get the same quality on a FLAC file, there is just something nice about having a physical thing and, playing it.
Totally. When as a kid, we loved reading all the liner notes, and, it was like a physical object you could hold, and while you listen to it. And when you're listening to a record, because it's kind of a ordeal, it's almost a ritual to listen to a record. So that's the activity. It's not background music. We take for granted digital music so easy to just pull up, but it's kind of in the background, and you don't actively pay attention. When you put on a record, it's kind of more like you sit down and listen to the record, kind of like the way you read a book. You can't read a book while you're doing other things. You're reading the book, right? So if you listen to a record, a lot of times people that listen to records, you're listening to the record. That's what you're doing. That's the activity, and if you like it, that's, the best way to kind of, to get it,
Yeah, you made that choice.
Yeah.
Now, but so you said you started collecting records in the 80s.
Yeah.
And then obviously, there was that explosion in the 90s with CDs where, we're kind of led to believe this is the fancy new shiny technology that's going to take over everything else. Did you kind of forget about records for a while and you just fully got into CDs, or were you always still collecting records even through the 90s?
I was still collecting records because some of the stuff wasn't available on CD yet. Or, I noticed that like when they first started doing the CD thing, that the ride cymbal was always too loud, because
Oh,
the digital
interesting.
highs were very crispy. And before they kind of
Yeah.
learned to mix music differently, you'd
Yeah.
always have like, why is that like ride cymbal louder than everything else on the song? Or like, certain things would kind of stick out and sound a little too clean or something.
Mm.
And, but if I couldn't find a record, I'd buy it on CD. If I couldn't find the CD, I get it on. I mean, usually I got the record, but if I couldn't find it, like the CD is more convenient for the car,
Yep.
you
True.
know, like, so I still have, and right now I still have a CD player in my car. So I just always, have a handful of CDs. I kind of like, just switch them out.
Yeah. And when you started out playing, was that as a bass player? Was that your
Yeah.
first instrument?
Yep.
Yeah. So like, who were your kind of like inspirations when you started playing bass? Who were you sort of like trying to emulate at the very beginning?
Let's see. I don't know if I was trying to particularly emulate anybody, but I learned playing the bass. I had taken guitar lessons in junior high, and basically, if I was getting graded, I would have been flunked out. I feel so horrible for my guitar teacher. It was like Groundhog Day. Every class, I didn't do any work in between, and it was
Yeah.
like him teaching me Mary Had a Little Lamb like for the 15th time or something. I just kept going in and like, what am I doing? So then I dropped doing that. And a few years later, I bought a used bass and I picked it up and I just started just banging around on it. It was just so much easier than guitar because there's no chords. You just play hum the melody, and you just kind of play, by ear. And I
Yeah.
learned playing bass by listening. Basically, two bands got me on the bass pretty confident. It was the Ramones and Black Sabbath. Because even though those bands are very different and stylistically are pretty far apart, it's
Yeah.
basically all pentatonic scale. It's
Mm.
all it's right on the dots. It's kind
Yeah.
of like in the box on the dots with some minor notes coming right off the dots. That's how I describe it. So I'm a self-taught musician, and it's everything in the Ramones catalog. It's like on the dots in the box, and then there's like a few notes that just go off of it. And same thing with Sabbath. You can kind of just, listen to that stuff and just figure it out. So that was my kind of the two archetypes that I kind of like, got me going.
Yeah. It's pretty funny. Like I started playing bass a long, long time after I'd been playing guitar. And when
Hmm.
I wanted to kind of like have stuff to play along to, the two bands that I was playing along to were Rollins Band
Oh
and
yeah.
Porno for Pyros.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it was the
In
Rollins
particular.
Band stuff, like the kind of earlier stuff, like up to the End of Silence with
Yep.
Andrew Weiss.
Oh
And
yeah.
then
Yeah.
and
That
it was
guy's
just like
amazing.
like a lot of like meandering around, which for me was great because it's just kind of like I didn't want to actually have to like be disciplined. I just wanted to like go all over the fretboard, so
Yeah,
it was
and
quite
just
good for
have
that.
fun with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw, what, I gotta say, he was definitely a big influence on me too. I saw those first tours after Henry quit Black Flag at the Living Room in Providence when I was a teenager. And that guy used to play barefoot. You remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And his bass playing was just amazing. He used his fingers, and I never
Mm.
liked the pick.
Yep.
Because I wanted to touch the strings, and I was just sloppy with a pick. I didn't have the fine tune, motor tune, control. So I really like touching the fingers and think of it like, like a bass, and he kind of had that, he just had that nasty tone too,
Yeah.
that growl. And yeah, those first Rollins Band records were great. Lifetime, Do It. And, even before that, the Hot Animal Machine and Henrietta Collins and the Wife
And the
Beating
wife
Child.
beating child haters. Yeah, yeah,
That
exactly.
record, I have all of that stuff on vinyl that I got when I was a kid. I still have it.
Yeah, yeah. What's I forget which one, the one with the weird kind of like sort of beat poetry birthday party thing with the man and the woman. He's like, that's no woman, that's my
That's my
wife.
wife. Totally. Beat that woman to an inch of her life. Beat that woman to an inch of her life. Yeah, that stuff was such dark comedy. Like
Yeah,
even Black Flag Family Man, that was
yeah,
great. Like I just, as a kid, I just really took to that sarcastic humor. Henry
yeah.
Rollins, Jello Biafra, those guys were just great. I saw Jello Biafra speak at Brown University in '89 when he did the No More Cocoon spoken word thing.
Hmm.
It was great. he comes out with the, trench coat on and the shades. And he's like, this is martial law. It's kind of like that whole intro for the record. It's really cool.
Yeah, that would have been pretty amazing. So you were growing up in around all of that, all of this kind of underground, post-punk, kind of like proto-grunge,
Yep.
alternative rock. You were in about all of that scene. What were some of like the other performances that had a big impact on you when you were impressionable kid?
Let's see. I saw the Fire Hose Screaming tour, Screaming Trees tour, like 87. I saw Butthole Surfers, Locust Abortion Technician, 87.
Wow.
I saw, again, the Rollins Band when they, right after Black Flag. The Ramones came through like every 6 months. Saw them a bunch. Circle Jerks, Bad Brains came through. I saw the Bad Brains Eye Against Eye tour, or maybe the one right after, like 87. I started going in 87. So I saw like a bunch of the hardcore punk stuff. I saw a bunch of the early noise rock stuff.
Yeah.
Even some of the hardcore stuff like, Agnostic Front and Youth of Today, but I never really got into that stuff as much. It was kind of like conservative punk or something. And I like more of the experimental stuff.
Yeah.
But I saw Big Audio Dynamite in 89. That was kind of cool. MIDI drums and, dudes with Steinbergers. Like, I didn't even know what I was looking at. Like, where's the instrument? Like, where's the body? Like, there's no headstock. There's no body. Just those, remember when those things came out?
Yeah, they did look very, very strange.
They looked very strange. And, like, they had the two guys, like Jamaican guys with dreads to the floor. And I was like, holy crap. I had never seen, that before.
Yeah.
So that was pretty impressionable. Yeah, that Butthole Surfers Locust Abortion Technician tour was insane. I mean, it was frightening, basically. You couldn't even look at them. They had like penis surgery like behind them on the, projector. So like it was just an affront. Like, that music, that record in particular has got the brown sound, and it's like the music makes you feel drunk when you're listening to it, even if you haven't had a drop of alcohol, and they'd throw fireworks into the pit. And, I went to school the next day all lumped up with welt all over my back. And, those years were very impressionable.
Yeah. I mean, do you think, could you have a band performing like that today?
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to say you can, but usually, maybe it's better outside than inside some of that stuff. I did some crazy things back in the day myself that I would never do now inside because, it's just too dangerous. We just had an anniversary of the station fire here in Rhode Island where 100 people lost their lives because Great White had to have their pyrotechnics like in a room with like, I don't even know if it was 10-foot ceilings. It was kind of like a bad thing. I don't know if you heard about that.
It does ring a bell, yeah, now that you mention it.
So like, doing that kind of stuff inside now is kind of in poor taste after something like that.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say we still push the limits in the Hammer Party.
So my understanding, and I know there were a whole bunch of other bands in between, but Hammer Party kind of started around 2018, 2019, and it was originally just going to be a one-off Halloween show where you're going to do big black tunes. And then, so how did you go from that to deciding you were going to carry on as the Hammer Party and then getting a real drummer?
Well, it was so much fun doing that set, learning the tunes, because I had never really done covers. I've been playing for 30 years. Never done covers, never really cared about covers, a handful here and, one or two here and there over the years, but never really focused on that. But it was kind of like a plan B. The band that was supposed to do it, my band Hot Knives, wasn't able to. A couple members couldn't be there. So then one of the dudes in the thing, the drummer, he was on board to play. And I came up with this idea, and we grabbed an old buddy, Andy Newman from Glazed Baby, and we're like, let's just do a set of big black covers. Let's, program the drum machine. And John Croce took care of that and played the bass. And then we had Andy on the guitar, and I just did the vocals. And it was so much fun doing it that we just decided to let's just, keep the band going, but ditch the covers and, get a real drummer. And, just make up our own stuff. But the name was kind of cool. Everybody just like, they saw that set. We actually did it a couple times because we were asked to do it again. It was only originally going to be a one-off, but then we did a couple shows. People like, oh, I want to see that. Like, oh, no one ever, would cover Big Black. Like no one's done that, like, so we did a couple shows, and I thought it was funny because I thought like, well, shit, if Steve Albini finds out about this, he's not going to like this at all.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, what's more punk than that, than piss it off Steve Albini?
Well, exactly. That's the thing. You don't want to be, limiting yourself by what you think other people are going to think. So I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's his music, and he's a strong, opinionated guy that I always, love Steve Albini and all the Big Black stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was really fun to do. And, we just had a blast doing it. We had the aluminum neck guitars, and, it was all cling clang,
Yeah. How did you go about kind of like, I'm wondering, when I think about Big Black, and sometimes I'm not really sure whether the guitars were Steve Albini, like specifically, but that guitar sound that they had, that really metallic sound was so distinctive. Were you kind of like trying to get as close to that as you could, or you just basically decided like, we're going to have a particular sound? It doesn't necessarily have to be kind of like so close to what they had.
Well, for that set in particular, Andy played an SG. He played a Gibson SG. So, that was a regular standard, guitar, but the bass player played a Kramer aluminum neck. So he had that kind of tone. So it was kind of opposite. Like the SG had a more muddy sound, and the bass player had the real clangy thing. But of course, for the covers, I'm like, Andy, you got to use my harmonic percolator, like, fuzz box, which is like, I had like a cheap clone that I bought on eBay. The real one, that Steve Albini had, those are like $500 or something, maybe more now. But I was like, Andy, just play this with your SG, and it will kind of give it that extra, color, the extra tone, like, microtones or whatever, like just the brightness will come through, So we did try to get it approximately as close as we could. When he learned the guitar playing for Kerosene, I was just like, holy crap, because I never knew like how he did that. When I was younger, I'm like, how are they doing this? Like, this doesn't even sound like guitar. It sounds like, a bunch of silverware being like thrown around in the the dishwasher kind of thing, So we did kind of try to approximate it. And then once we went in our own direction, we would just, didn't try to sound like Big Black. We just tried to sound like all the other Providence noise rock bands that are not, we didn't try to sound like, but we just sounded like that because that's what we had been doing,
Yeah, we
just kind of like kept the name.
Yeah,
we just like, extension of the stuff that we had already been doing for years, decades, basically. So it was cool because people liked the name, and even a lot of people didn't even realize it was a Big Black reference. You know what I mean? They just thought it was a strong sounding name, and they're like, your songs all kind of sound like, they're very repetitive and, they're kind of aggressive. So the name just kind of stuck and fit. So we kept it.
Yeah. The Hammer Party. Yeah. Whether it's connected to Big Black or not, it's a cool name to have. Like, what kind of party is a hammer party?
Exactly. It's a little weird, it's kind of like on the edge of cringe, you know what I mean? It's a little violent, but
yeah. And so, like, you've brought up noise rock a couple of times, and that's like a tag that's associated with a lot of the music that you've played. When I think of the stuff that I was into from the early 90s, like Jesus Lizard, for example, I don't know if anyone used the term noise rock back then. So like when you first started making music, was that a thing that people said, or has it only been later that people have gone, oh, this is actually noise rock?
Yeah,
like,
I think it is kind of a term that has been used like in hindsight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, but I mean in the 80s, the bands like Sonic Youth, Dinosaur Jr., they were like the noisy end of post-punk, or like the noisy end of indie. Yep. Or like, people always describe that as kind of like, noisy punk rock. It's all punk rock. I mean, in the end, it's all rock and roll, right? To me, it is anyway. Yep. But, I always thought of that stuff as punk rock in the 80s. Now when people say punk rock, they almost kind of think of specifically like a pop punk thing maybe, or like they don't, it's been whittled down to just like garage rock. You say garage rock and everyone associates it with like the 12-bar blues, like garage rock and roll, whereas like there were garage rock bands that were really weird, You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like I have those Nuggets compilations and, Captain Beefheart's on there, and like, a lot of other bands, the Music Machine, stuff that doesn't just fall into that, rock and rolly like Sonic stuff, which I mean, I love that stuff too. But, I think sometimes genres that people just start thinking about like the one little style in that genre that kind of takes over the dominance of the sound where, in the 80s, the Butthole Surfers were just as punk, if not more, than the Exploited in the UK or something, like
Yeah, for sure.
and I think like noise rock to me is just the experimental end of punk rock.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's how I see it, as like a continuum. It's just like, yeah, the weirder stuff, which I always gravitated towards because it was just more expressive and more fun. It was more like not trying to copy something, and just everybody had their own sound, their own
Yeah.
kind of vibe. Especially someone like the Jesus Lizard, like they're too organized and too good to just, they don't call themselves noise rock. They're just an experimental rock band.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've got such a tight rhythm section, and
Yeah.
you've got, like a very distinctive style of guitar with Dwayne Dennison. And then obviously you've got David Yao, who's just completely, one of a kind, crazy
Yeah.
frontman.
I have a really funny story about the first time I saw them. They were, one of the bands that came through that I was thinking that first record they had Pure with the drum machine, right? In the back, it's just produced by Steve Albini. So we're in high school thinking like, this has got to be like a new Steve Albini side project, because Big Black had broken up. And I think it was maybe it was right around the same time as Rape Man kind of had a thing. I went up to Boston to see them and I couldn't get in because it was 18 plus. I drove my friends in high school. They were seniors. They got in and I had to just sit out and listen to it in front of the club. But anyway, so the Jesus Lizard came to town. We're thinking it was maybe a secret Steve Albini project because it kind of had a similar sound. And I'm in the club. There's maybe like 15, 20 people in it. The Rocket. This is like 89, I think. And there's this guy playing pool all night, denim, head to toe, little pointy cowboy boots on, balding, older guy, little short guy, getting kind of wrecked, kind of blitzed up. Like, and I'm just thinking, like, this guy is like, just like from the sticks. I thought he was just some local dude from the sticks getting kind of like, fucked up. And when the Jesus was went on, that guy ran over to the mic, grabbed it, did the thing, jumped out into the crowd. There's no crowd. Jumped out on the floor, hit the ground, did the Homer Simpson fucking spin on the floor. And I'm like, oh, that's the singer of the band. Like, what the hell? It was so awesome. I'm like, of course, and then, then Head came out, the record, and then you see the listing of the people and it's like, oh, it's half of Scratch Acid. Like, that makes sense, It all kind of came together. But that was very impressionable seeing that like early on with no one in there. And that guy doing the same thing, whether there's 20 people or 200 people in the room, he did like the same shtick. You know what I mean? It's pretty wild.
Yeah. There's so many crazy stories of David Yao and
Yeah.
his onstage antics.
Yeah. Nuts.
So like, what about for you when you think of the various different bands that you've played with, and you mentioned, like, I think, like, when did Landed first start? That was sort of like 97, 98, something like that.
Yep. 97. We started, I was living in a mill space in Olneyville and down the hall with some couple dudes from RISD graduates that had just graduated. And my bands had played with, and their bands, they had a band called Computers. Joel Kayak and Sean Greenlee had a band called Computers. So I had played with them in my band, the Hydrogen Terrors, and we knew who we were, but we started hanging and listening to records, and then we like just started jamming. So that was really kind of organic and fun. And it all just happened out of like, we didn't set out like, oh, let's, there wasn't like an ad in the paper or anything,
Yeah.
with a certain fixed style or anything. We just had like this kind of loose improvisational style. And it just, I was actually started off playing bass in that. And then we had a show where I had like broken my hand the night before, not realized it, but I knew I couldn't play the bass. I just went to CVS and got like one of those, carpal tunnel casts to put on just to, sure it up. And I couldn't play the bass. So I had a shortwave radio that I had plugged into my bass amp, and I was just going to be like the extra static. Like I was just going to be like the noise guy. You know, we had like bass, guitar, you know, drums, and I was just going to be like the, you know, like doing the noise thing for interference. And then that thing died. Like first fucking 30 seconds of the set, that thing died. And I'm like, uh-oh, what am I going to do? I have nothing. I'm up here like with nothing. And the mic was right there, like in front of the stage. So I'm like, all right, I guess I'm the singer tonight. And I just grabbed it and like crawled through the crowd on my feet, like grabbing people's legs. And I'm just like, you know, I just did the whole weird, like, you know, front person thing.
That's a wild, organic way to start being a singer.
Yeah. And I could have never done that before. Like, you know, I couldn't even give a book report in high school. Like it was so weird how it happened. And, you know, I like playing the bass because I was kind of in the back in the shadows, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it was kind of like, it was kind of like a sink or swim moment. And I did it. And it was kind of fun to just be able to, you can kind of do anything within reason, you know what I mean? Like when you know, you have a mic, it's like the only thing, you know, you're not going to get thrown in the funny farm.
That's true.
Like,
yeah.
For like expressing yourself. And, you know, if you're like the vocalist in a band, you can kind of almost, you can kind of almost do anything, say anything, you know?
Exactly. And just say it's a performance.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
So from that point on, was that just kind of like you made the switch to being a frontman to being a vocalist, or were you still being, you know, playing bass as well in other
I did
times?
still play a little bass. I played bass in Onlyville Sound System, you know, parallel with that time. And then eventually Six Finger Satellite, I filled in for you know, a couple little tours thing and a record on their last record they put out. And that was really cool because I had been like waiting 20 years to play with them.
That was a good year for Hardness. Is that right?
Yeah. That was that. Yeah. I played the bass on that one. So I was still playing bass. You know, I had a band, Vincibus Eruptum, that I was playing bass in. And I was kind of like doing one or the other. I don't really like doing both at the same time. I kind of had to learn how to do it for OSS a little bit. But I really prefer, like, they're kind of two different head games, right? Playing bass is almost like a mellow thing. You kind of get in the groove and you just kind of do it, you know? And being a vocalist is kind of more like you're out there to kind of like, it's a different, you know, performance style kind of head game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the style of music. I mean, like, this is maybe a weird reference point, but if you're going to be Sting in The Police, you know, like, the vocal delivery has got a bit of like a kind of a, well, I guess like white man's funk thing that's going on.
Yeah.
But you know, like if you imagine the Jesus Lizard, like try to imagine David Yao playing those bass parts and doing his vocal performances, like that would just be impossible.
Yeah, it's like incongruent.
Totally.
You know, they're like oil and water, you know what I mean? Like the band's super tight and he's the loose cannon, you know, that works, you know?
Yeah. Exactly.
You couldn't really do that. I mean, some people kind of did that with the guitar. I'm trying to think of who really kind of, I mean, you know, someone like Kurt Cobain jumping out into the crowd with his guitar and, you know, that kind of stuff. There's a little bit of that, but you just don't have the freedom when you're like plugged in like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you got to keep your guitar in tune and it's like, you know, it's totally.
So going back specifically to the Hammer Party, so you had this origin as doing the big black covers, and then you added a drummer, you kind of you started making music as a band, making originals, and then, you know, the COVID black hole came along and destroyed everything, and then you lost your friend and your guitarist.
Yeah.
So like that must have been, you know, a hugely chaotic time for all of that together. How did you go from all of that to getting back into playing and carrying on with the band?
Yeah, that was definitely a weird time, you know. The pandemic is weird enough. So it kind of did put things in slow motion. And Andy died right there in 2021. Or the end of 2020, actually. And it was really bizarre. It was definitely bizarre. But we kind of took like a few months off maybe from even, you know, the three of us were just in shell shocked, just like, what the, but maybe because it was during the pandemic, it wasn't like we had to get right back into playing. I mean, we thought that he would want us to continue. So we just like, well, let's just see what happens, you know? So the three of us, after taking like a few weeks off, or, you know, we got back together just jamming. And without a guitar player, we were just like, well, let's just, keep the jams alive just because it's fun. I've been playing music a long time, and what I really enjoy is getting together once a week with my buddies. Like
Yeah.
it's like a lifestyle. When we were younger, we'd play, several times a week. But as you get older, people like it's kind of a once a week thing.
Yeah, if you can manage to hold that together, then you're doing well.
Yeah, a lot of bands only practice before they have a show, or
Mm.
like, once a month, whether they need it or not. Like I like doing it weekly. So we just got back into the swing of just hanging out, listening to records and, jamming. And then finally a friend, an old buddy of Andy's asked if he could join. And he was living in New York City at the time, but he owned some property in Providence and he's from the area. So he was always coming back up. So I was like, we really want a Providence guy. We want to make it so it's easy to practice. We don't want to hunt anybody down, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's not going to work. You have to, if you're in it for the long haul, you have to make practice fun. You have to make it interesting. You have to make it easy, because if not, no one's going to want to bother doing it, because it's
Yep.
not like we're making money. I don't think I've ever really made money on underground music. And that's not what it's about anyway,
Yeah.
But I mean, if you can get to that level and, all the power, and that's awesome, if you want to like tour, most of the year or whatever. I've never really done that. But basically we just kept playing, and then we had a friend offered to play guitar with us, and it, ended up being, it was cool for a while, and he worked out. He, did another record with us, but then his son killed himself.
Oh,
And we're like, what the hell is going on? This is, it was, pandemic was weird enough, and then we have two tragedies, and then like, who's going to want to play guitar? And this is like this, the drummer part for like Spinal Tap,
yeah.
guitar players are incinerating. What are we going to do? So another friend who reached out to us, I'm like, man, you got a hot seat, kid. You better watch your back. If you want to join this thing, just be careful. He's like, well, I'm going through a divorce right now. I'm like, well, maybe that's your thing. Maybe
Exactly.
we got it out of the way. So, he was a big fan of the band. Amazing guitar player, Damian Perini, joined. And then, he came down with the riffs tabbed out. And I never seen anyone show up for rehearsal like that. I mean, he came correct. He knew the songs. It was amazing, it fit right in. And then we, started working on new material.
So did you have him on that latest single, the Tiamat's Revenge? Did he play on that?
Yeah. He came on that one, and it was, it was really fun putting that one together. Because it's probably like almost proggy. Like, it's not that it's prog, but you know what I mean? It's got
relatively speaking, yeah.
Yeah, time signature changes and, weird stuff going on. A lot of stops and starts and,
So that was like in about, when was that? That came out like in March last year. So Are you already have you been working on other tracks that you're planning on making another EP or making an album out of?
Yeah. We got like 3 solid new tunes, and we got a couple different riffs we've been working around. So we're going to try and wait till like at least 5 songs and then record like another EP or full album.
Yeah.
Hopefully this spring.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm excited about that. The new songs are really cool. They fit in with the old ones. And, it's always about the new stuff, So as a musician, I like always working on the new stuff. Is the creative aspect of it. And, it's just fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to ask you, because I was going to ask you anyway, and then you brought up Captain Beefheart. I was thinking, listening to some of your music with the Hammer Party, like, for example, I think it's on Smashed Hits, the track Waiting for the Bus.
Yeah.
Made me think of Captain Beefheart a bit.
Awesome.
So do you think that that's kind of filtered into your style?
Definitely.
Captain Beefheart?
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. That guy's stuff is so awesome. And again, his records are all over the place, they're all different. There's more conservative versions and, get the whacked out Trout Mask replica. But he's definitely a big influence on me and on us as a band.
Yeah. So like what other kind of influences have you had in terms of being a vocalist or being a performer?
Let's see. Well, growing up, I really liked the later Black Flag stuff with Rollins. I mean, that stuff I really liked when they got weird, because, it was almost, punk had become such a cookie cutter kind of style,
Yeah.
and then they branched out. And to me, that was almost more punk. They didn't look punk. You'd never know that they were like the band if they walked into the Cumberland Farms or whatever, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, it's just a bunch of, random weirdos or whatever. But then their music, it just like blew out to, really weird riffs and weird time signatures. And, I always liked his storytelling.
Yeah, for sure.
And then again, all the, the noise rock stuff from the 80s. I mean, hindsight, that's what we call it. Killdozer, the Midwest scene, Big Black, Killdozer, all that stuff. Butthole Surfers. I just love all of that, just the experimental stuff.
Yeah.
All the hardcore punk stuff I love, I grew up with. I definitely that's in there too, Stooges. I mean, those guys, they're the originals of, the first record in Funhouse. That's like the archetype for a lot of noise rock stuff, not so much. I mean, Raw Power is awesome and I love it. That's the blueprint for punk rock, but the blueprint for noise rock is like Funhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible just to think of like Funhouse coming out at that time.
Yeah.
Just to make a record like that back in whenever it was, 1970.
Yeah. Nothing sounded like that. That song TVI, like what?
Exactly.
It was just amazing. They had like that dude had like the delivery of like Jim Morrison, but like had like they had the sonic approach of like something that was just far beyond and weirder than, any of that Baroque psychedelic stuff that the Doors did, like, which again, I mean, I loved them when I was a kid. I loved the Doors and, all that early metal stuff. When I was in junior high, it was like, Quiet Riot and Twisted Sister, and Ozzy Osbourne, and like, that wasn't my parents' music,
Yeah.
That was my music.
Yeah.
But then I quickly switched to punk as soon as I found out about it,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I came quite late for punk because I think the stuff that I liked when I was a kid, I sort of like started out with sort of like 80s pop music, which is all like very well produced. And then I got into like alternative rock and grunge, and I got into metal through that way. But it took a while for me to be able to go like, okay, I can let go of like really well produced stuff and enjoy stuff that's more raw. And then, there was a whole world of
just opened up
that was opened up to me. Yeah, exactly. But I kind of went in a sort of an opposite way to get there.
Yeah, that's cool though. It doesn't matter how you get there,
That's true.
I always just loved different kinds of music growing up. And when I was a really little kid, I liked Dixieland and jazz and, I like that sound a lot, the honky tonk piano and boogie woogie, my parents were into rock and roll, just, the Beatles and all the, the standards. But,
well, that's pretty cool to be growing up with that as well. Like if the Beatles is going to be what the older generation are listening to, like, that's a worse thing to be, pushing away from.
Yeah, I loved, like, my parents had the White Album. And again, for variety, I mean, that record got everything on it, and I always had my ears attuned to a wide variety of music. So, as I got older, I just loved incorporating all different things into, the punk rock kind of stuff that I did.
Yeah.
I got to see Sun Ra play at the New England Conservatory in like 92, right before he died.
Wow.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, at Sun Ra, they wheeled him. So the first guy comes out in the orchestra banging on two sticks, like literally just two guy banging on two sticks. And then it's like they all come out one at a time with the instruments. And after there's like 15, 20 dudes on stage, they wheel out Sun Ra in his wheelchair and like two big hands like up on the keyboard with his like, tinfoil hat with Saturn on it and everything. I was just like blown away. I was so psyched to see that.
It's quite an entrance.
Yeah.
And something else, so I wanted to ask you, which is kind of like a bit of a question to sort of like overview your whole, decades in music. I was thinking, so we grew up before digital music was a thing and before streaming was a thing. And obviously, like, there are a million horror stories of bands and musicians getting ripped off throughout the ages, so it's like, on the one hand, we can kind of like look at streaming services and go like, oh, they fucked certain things up. But on the other hand, it's like people working sort of like in the underground or independent level sort of been getting screwed throughout history. So like, I wonder for you, like if, you know, if thinking back, like some of the music you were making in the mid 90s, like I was, forget which one it was, but there's like one of your mid 90s bands, you had vinyl that you put out. I forget if it was with Landed. I think it might have been with Landed.
Hmm.
And then like your most recent EP with the Hammer Party, Earth Abides, you put out on vinyl as well. So I'm wondering for you, if you like think about those 2 points in your musical career, has it got easier? Has it got more difficult? Or is it kind of like stayed the same for you in terms of being able to make music and put it out?
It's kind of stayed the same. I really haven't noticed any difference. It's a real niche scene.
Yep.
I've never made enough money to like live on. It's kind of just pays for like itself. Like, the gigs we save up, like, right now we have like a couple grand in the band fund to like, finance the next vinyl, or if we want to rent a van to play some gigs out of state, or, we always had a little bit of a band fund, but like we just collectively keep it. Cause if we each, left with it, the $50 at the end of the night, it doesn't amount to anything, but if we like pool it together, we can save up for like to make some t-shirts or to put out a record or to help, a buddy put out a record. Like, even Ben would load records. Like we usually took care of like the recording, and he took care of like the pressing the records kind of thing. We kind of shared the duties, shared the financial obligations, but I haven't really seen any difference, like, and usually the record companies always paid us in records. You know what I mean? Like, you get like 50 records, and then if you sell those records for $10-20 each, you get a few $100 or whatever, but I don't think there's any, unless you're touring regularly or you get picked up by a major label or even like a big underground label. I think those guys have day jobs too. I don't think I haven't seen it really change. It's easier now because there's more access to things. Like right now, there's several, companies that liaison with record plants, and you can just go online. Like the Tiamat's Revenge, I set that all up on my phone. I uploaded the artwork, like everything, the files. I just did it all on the phone. I didn't even have a laptop computer to like handle the, I just put everything on a website, and then like we got the records in 3 months. I was like, wow, that's so now it's easier than ever. If, to kind of do cottage industry thing, and back then it was really hard to do. Ben McCosk would like have the records printed somewhere, have the artwork printed somewhere else. We'd have record parties. We'd have to put together like 500 copies, put it all together ourselves, put it in the plastic sleeve, and that was fun too, but I think it's easier now to maybe produce it.
Yep.
But like, you have to have the financial backing to do it. But I mean, in the end, $1,000 to put out a couple hundred records, small run. Like if 4 people can't get together and put together $1,000, like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? It's not like, we're not talking like, a mortgage on a house or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same amount of money that you'd probably take to make t-shirts. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, but instead of putting out a cassette tape or making bumper stickers, put out a record.
And how, in terms of like marketing, like how much do you devote time to social media, for example? Like how valuable do you take that side of things to be?
Well, I'm trying to think of like, how much time I'm embarrassed to say we don't spend a lot of time doing that, to be honest. It's kind of like we put it up there. We announce when we have shows in town. You don't want to overplay because then people would stop coming to see us. So we play like every few months. We play in town, and we do the social media thing. We announce the shows. We make a flyer, maybe, throw up a video or something of a previous show. Once in a while, we announce like when we have like, new material coming, or, we're putting out a record. We don't do it excessively because I think that just gets annoying.
Yep.
Just like at a Hammer Party show, you're never going to hear me be like, oh, come stand closer. Like if you want to stand closer, stand closer. If not, stand where you feel comfortable. Because like, I'm not going to ask people to come up to the front of the stage and then like knock a beer out of their hand by accident. You know what I mean? And be like, oops, like, you know what I mean? So we don't really peddle ourselves on social media the way some bands do. we put up what's necessary,
Yep.
and we don't overdo it because we're not really, again, we're older guys, and we don't really, I actually think of it like a tool, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it's cool that it's there and it helps, people see our stuff, but we don't pay like extra to like have something pumped or pushed. You know how like
Yeah.
you can do that on Facebook to get your stuff. We don't do any of that. We just kind of let it happen organically. So the followers that we have, they're actual followers. We don't pay for followers or like do any of we don't really care about that. We care about meeting up once a week and playing in the practice space and making new stuff and putting out records. Like that's the documentation. When you like vinyl's final, and if you want it reviewed in Europe, you put it on vinyl. You know what I mean? So we're kind of more into just the organicness of just doing it and just playing. It's a lifestyle. I've been doing this for a long time, and I do it, I think, because I really enjoy it, and if, maybe I did get to the point where we were touring all the time and playing, maybe I'd already be burnt out and been done with it. A lot of, bands are gone and people are gone. People our age don't really do this anymore, Maybe they, got burnt out. There's hundreds of reasons why people don't play music, but I think the level that we maintained over the years kind of kept it interesting and fun and makes me still have the drive to want to do it. I mean, I would love to play more festivals and, to get out. I'd love to get to Europe. Definitely. I only got to play in Europe once. We did a month tour and with Onlyville Sound System, and it was like one of the best experiences of my life. And that was a dream come true, So I would love to get there. And that was only a duo. We went over there as like a drum and bass duo, and it was sick. I can't imagine, being over there with the Hammer Party would be insane. Yeah. It would be a lot of fun.
And it's a different, like, I've very, very limited experience in the US, but I get the impression from talking to various different bands, like one of the things with playing in the US is everything's spread out so much. It's like if you want to go for a tour, you got to think about these gigantic distances. Whereas when you're in Europe, you can kind of get from one country to another relatively quickly. And there's so many different places that you can play.
Exactly. And that's what we were thinking. Like, the gas now is just so expensive. Driving the US, and it's all the same. It's all strip malls and it's all kind of flat and kind of boring. The coasts are fun. I mean, and, there's awesome venues and cultures and scenes in like all around the US. It's very different all over, it's so big, but Europe is so much closer and just more interesting. I'd rather do that than tour the US would be like, no, let's fly up to the West Coast, play some gigs and fly home. We did a couple of years ago, we did the No Coast Fest in Texas, and we flew down, and then we played with OCs at Levitation in Austin. It was a great weekend, and then we flew home. We just had our guitars with us, borrowed amps and drums and stuff. But, I feel like the surgical strikes in the US is kind of what you want to do, especially at our level and at our age. It's more practical to just kind of fly out, do a weekend. I'd love to do the Midwest sometime, half a dozen gigs, in the Midwest and then fly home, something quick, something easy. But like, I don't want to drive in a van for like 3 months with 4 sweaty dudes. I don't think any of us are interested in doing that at this age.
Well, exactly. Like, to your point about people burning themselves out, you can find a way to keep making music for decades, but I don't know if you want to be sleeping on the floor of a van for decades.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly. So, I do that if we got the chance to tour Europe, I'd drive around in a van for a month easy again. Yeah. But Europe's amazing, all the the cultures and the languages and the environment and all the the Alps are like, you drive, usually it's like you're driving all around the Alps,
Yeah. I think like the novelty value would definitely, compensate for the discomfort for a while.
Yeah. We were in a van with five dudes with Onlyville Sound System and John McKay from Amiens, France, and Kunda Hola, Camille from Czech Republic. And it was a blast. It was, 5 of us in a little Volkswagen van. We all shared gear, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So thinking about the forthcoming weeks and months, so like you mentioned that you're working on some songs which are hopefully going to turn into an EP.
Hmm.
Like, you know, in terms of promoting what you're doing, where's like the best place for people to go? Like if people follow the band on Bandcamp,
Yep,
that
yep,
going to be like the most up-to-date place to see when there's news of new releases coming up, or if you're going to be playing
definitely,
shows?
definitely. We're on Bandcamp and we're on Instagram and Facebook. So those are the three spots where everything, everything gets updated pretty much at the same time.
Yeah.
Bandcamp, Instagram, and Facebook page.
And is there anything else that you'd like to promote apart from what you're doing with the Hammer Party at the moment?
Um, no, that's it. That's the main focus right now. We'll see.
Cool.
Hopefully Landon can get some shows going on at some point.
Yeah.
I talked to those guys and that would be a great reunion. We played the last shows we played a couple nights with the OCs in New York City. I think that was 2018, 19, something like that. And they were amazing shows. That was a wild time. John Dwight used to play and landed with us when he was younger, before he moved out west. So that would be really fun if we could get some, a couple landed gigs going again.
Yeah, for sure.
But
It's cool.
right
Like you
now,
say, that's kind of like always there as a potential that
exactly. Yeah, we remained friends, and that was a real cool improvisational kind of thing. So we'd probably revisit some old tunes and then mix in some new stuff and have some open-ended sections of the set. That's how we always did that band.
Yeah. Dan, it was cool to talk to you. And
You too.
I look forward to hearing what comes next in your
Awesome.
musical endeavors.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun chatting.
It was a pleasure.
All
All the
right.
best.
All right. Take care.
You too.